Welcome to this second session. I hope we have a lot of fun. I'll get rid of the howl round. My name's Steve Evans. I do a business program on the BBC, and my only role is to be completely ignorant and ask the stupid questions that maybe other people would want asked. So we're going to talk about the new big thing about greenery, and I'm curious about whether it's a fad or whether it's real and what the economics are and where it's going to be in 5 years' time, that kind of thing. This session is billed as the Necker Island discussion continued. Necker Island, you may know. It was a gathering, I was going to say the great and the good, I don't know, but of the great anyway, on Richard Branson's island in the Caribbean earlier in the year. Yeah, you can tell me, when was it? About February, something like that?
Yeah, approximately.
And it was, a lot of people, Larry Page, Jimmy Wales, Tony Blair, no less, Richard Branson, of course, because it was his island. Very, very widely publicized as being people turning their capacious minds to a big problem on the planet. I mean, let me read you some of the quotes from the New York Times. I get all my information from the New York Times. If it's not in the Times, it ain't been said, is the way I look at it. The big question that came out of that meeting was, so do we really think the world is on fire? Now, the Times then has a rider, a very snide rider, but I'll read it anyway. As a manservant scurried off to fetch another glass of Pinot Grigio. That's the snidey Times there. Somebody said, in James Bond movies, evildoers meet in exotic settings to plot the destruction of the planet. But in this case, people were meeting in a very exotic setting to try and save the planet. So a whole heap of... The final Times quote was from Branson, apparently. Normally the girls would be naked, but the Prime Minister is here.
That was very disappointing.
So there's a lot to think about and a lot to talk about in that meeting. But clearly something happened. It symbolized something, whatever the concrete outcome. Big people were thinking in a different way, so it was important. On my immediate left is Elon Musk, who was at that meeting, chairman of Tesla Cars, founder of PayPal, and chairman of SolarCity, a big Californian provider of solar panels to homes. And on his left, Lyndon, Rive, who's the CEO of that company. So if greenery is the new thing, these two guys are right at the forefront of it. They know all about the economics because it's the economics of their own company. So let's talk a little bit about that. Elon, first of all, you were at the meeting. Let's get the tat out the way. Let's get the cheapness out the way. What was it like there? I mean, what happened?
Well, it was, first of all, fairly quick. I was only there for about 36 hours. And I've been there before. Richard's a friend of mine, and overall a good guy, and obviously a very fun guy. And the idea was just to try it out and see if we could get a bunch of people together and see if there are any ideas we could come up with to accelerate the environmental action, improvements to the environmental technology in the world. Is there other things we can do to improve that and get it more widespread?
How did it work? Did you all go around in your, what the Brits call bathers, and then meet for formal sessions and say, okay, what are we going to do here? Or, how did it work? Was it as billed?
No. As described in the New York Times article?
Well,
I think that
was it a proper discussion?
I think that glass of Pinot was for Andrew Sorkin, the writer of the article, by the way.
Say that again. Let's turn the speaker down.
Yeah, there's some sort of feedback mechanism or something.
We're kind of getting our own voices back here. If you just turn that speaker down. Thanks. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was just saying that the glass of Pinot Grigio was probably for the New York Times writer. Because he seemed to be certainly indulging at least as much as everybody else.
On a serious note, when you came away from that, how were you thinking about things differently from when you got there? If indeed you were, I don't know. Sounds like you weren't.
Well, it was a short. I wouldn't put too much into the meeting. It was just really a gathering of people talking about environmental technologies and what could be done to further things. I think I was able to educate a few of the people there about the status of solar and electric vehicles. Larry Page was there, who's a good friend of mine. We jet pooled, by the way, if that means anything.
I just want to say that first.
Is that better? Yeah, it's better, I think, yeah.
Yes. Can everybody hear at the back? No?
Can you hear me? Is this good?
I can't ask you if you can't hear, because you won't be able to hear. Okay. Keep going.
All right, I'll give it a shot.
You were saying that you were that there was an interaction and people did learn.
Yeah, I think I educated people about the status of solar and electric vehicles. Larry Page and I are pretty much on exactly the same page as far as electric vehicles and solar. And I think we were able to move people's opinion a little bit as to what the right technology solution is. Because if we keep going down dead ends and things that just really don't add up from an engineering standpoint, then it's not going to we're not going to improve matters.
What's changed? I mean, well, has anything changed in this country? When anybody outside listening to you now would say, oh yeah, the Americans, they're talking a bit of the talk, but underneath it all, there's nothing really different. Would they be wrong?
Yes.
Why?
Well, first of all, there's a tremendous amount of activity going on in solar. In fact, I'll make two predictions here. One is that in 30 years, we will generate more electricity from solar than from any other source, at least domestically, and probably in the world. And we will make more cars will be pure electric than any other mode. There won't be hybrid, pure electric. And 30 years is, I'm sandbagging, it's probably less time. And most of that technology will be driven from the United States, probably 80% of it. In fact,
let me get this right. In the US or the planet, in 30 years, solar will be the biggest source of power.
Biggest single source of power, yes. So a combination of solar, thermal, and photovoltaic.
How do we get from here to there?
We're getting from here to there. The compound growth is extraordinary. We're talking about, what is it, 40% annualized growth, something like that?
Absolutely, and that's before the new innovation relating to financial offerings to make it easy for people to adopt solar power.
Well, I was going to turn to you, Lyndon. I mean, tell me about your company. Tell me what it's doing and explain how are you making money out of it, if you are, or how are you planning to make money out of it?
Sure, so our company focuses on the last part of the value chain, installing solar power for both homes and businesses. If you look at the entire value chain, half the cost is in installation. So our focus is to reduce that cost. Even with reducing that, the biggest barrier to adoption historically has been the upfront cost. Sure. An average homeowner would have to spend $20,000 to $30,000 to get a solar system. We often get the question, when is solar going to be financially feasible?
I was about to ask you.
Great. The answer is it's feasible today through creative financing instruments. You can go solar, doesn't cost you a cent. In fact, you save money from day one. So you have the option of using clean power or dirty power and paying less for clean power.
Yeah, let's be clear, be crystal clear about that. Zero money down, your electricity bill is less. How do you like that proposition?
It sounds pretty good, but I was going to pick up your phrase, creative financial instrument. Is that code for subsidy?
It is code for subsidy. There are federal tax subsidies available today that is required to sustain the solar industry at least for the next 5 to 6 years. After that, innovation will occur in technology that will address that gap of that tax subsidy. So today, the tax subsidy is 30%. Over the next 5 to 6 years or so, the cost will come down to be able to sustain itself without that subsidy.
Yeah, 30% is not all that crazy. I mean, if you look at the rate of technology innovation, as Lyndon says, we will comfortably be past 30% in 4 or 5 years. In fact, right now, the cost of photovoltaics is not driven by the underlying, the price of a photovoltaic cell is not driven by the cost. It is driven because there is a constrained supply. There's so much demand in the world right now for photovoltaics that the price, I mean, if you're a photovoltaics company, you're minting money right now.
Except that, so what your argument is that it's viable. It can, unpropped up by the taxpayer, it can compete on even terms, but once the scale is there. Or does something have to happen as well as that?
It definitely can compete on even terms. The terms also range from state to state, what the alternative cost of power is. In California, in Hawaii, in Arizona, cost of power is pretty high. So it can definitely compete in those areas.
Do you need the price of oil where it is, or let me put it another way, if the price of oil goes down to, what we used to think of as sensible levels, I don't know, 2/3 what it is now even, does your business model take a bit of a hit? Got to, isn't it?
It's not really, because most power is driven by coal.
Or natural gas,
yes,
or nuclear. It's about like 40% coal in California or something like that.
Lyndon last night was saying that if a technology is so out of line on cost, which I think yours probably is at the moment, let's forget about it, because at the end of it all, that's not going to be the way the planet goes. Does he have a point?
Well, if he's referring to solar, he's completely wrong. As I said, the cost of the photovoltaics is not, the price to end customers is not driven by the cost. If you simply had
an upfront cost.
No, I want to be clear about, so the price of something can be driven by the cost fundamentals that underlie it, or it can be driven by demand.
Sure.
In the case of photovoltaics right now, it is driven by demand. The demand is so high, it so far exceeds the supply that the price is artificially high right now. Even if you were just to extract that, you would probably get at least a 10 to 20% reduction in the cost of solar.
Why aren't all these companies coming in then if the demand is so immense? Why not just slake that demand and make a lot of money?
They're doing that. There's
doing.
Massive supply coming online, massive.
Give me an idea.
So essentially, every single solar production company that I've spoken to is tripling their production in 2009. Tripling. And they are forecasting they're going to still struggle to keep up with that. So the demand is so huge for solar because it's hitting to a point where it's financially feasible that suppliers are struggling to keep up. But we forecast around middle of 2009, the equilibrium will swing and there'll be enough supply to meet the current demand, and then pricing will drop slightly.
So when we get to that situation in this state, what proportion of homes will be powered by solar panels as opposed to, I don't know, whatever?
So the challenge that we face is not the percentage of homes that adopt solar power, it's how fast can we get it installed. So let's say there was technology available today that was $1 a watt, and it was extremely feasible. The adoption wouldn't occur any faster. We at max capacity, so we are growing as fast as we possibly can to install it on people's roofs.
Yeah, in fact, it's worth just... Sorry. They're growing as fast as possible. To put things into perspective, SolarCity is only about 2 years old.
Sure.
In the first 6 months, we were like about 4 million in revenue, something like that.
That's right.
Last year, which was the first full year of operation, was 29 million. This year, 80 million.
80 million.
And what's that
that's
as a proportion
crazy
of the
growth.
total? Yeah, sure. But what's that as a proportion of the total?
In California, we've only hit 1% of the market.
Less than that, even.
Yeah, it's barely hitting 1% of the market.
That's total solar.
Total solar deployed in California.
Yeah.
What about solar panel?
Cumulatively over 30 years.
What about solar power as a realistic power source of size on this planet?
Absolutely. As I said, it'll be the biggest source of power.
On the planet?
Yes, absolutely.
even in grey areas where we never ever see the sun, like England?
Well, first of all, that's a common misconception. Plants are a solar-powered chemical reaction. Do plants grow in England?
Just about.
Okay.
Sometimes. When was
It's quite green. Yes,
and
so
pleasant land.
actually, where England would have a problem is with solar thermal or anything that requires a concentrator. Because the effect of clouds is primarily to diffuse sunlight, but not really to absorb much of the energy.
Doesn't it diminish it at all?
A little bit, but not much. Again, go back to the fact that plants are a solar-powered chemical reaction. So you would see plants growing much slower in England than in a sunny environment if, in fact, the energy absorbed by clouds was very high. But it's not. It's actually quite low. What clouds tend to do is they diffuse the sunlight. But photovoltaics don't care about diffused photons. They don't really care very much about the angle at which the photon hits the silicon.
So where are, let me get this right, high and presumably low latitudes, where do they figure in that equation?
It's not a huge difference, provided you have the angle. I mean, you need to set the angle according to what your latitude is. You know, so you're getting the same.
Something worth mentioning is Germany is the largest market in the world.
Yeah, it's
Sure.
not very sunny
And
there.
massively subsidised it is there.
Yes, it is.
When do we...
But you know, one thing that's worth mentioning is people often talk about the subsidies of solar, but what about the subsidies of oil and coal?
Go on.
They're much greater.
Go on.
Well,
Where's the subsidy to coal or oil compared to solar? How do you reckon that?
I don't know, it's calculated by the NRDC and by those. I think it's a factor of 10 higher in
I can see the argument that the market doesn't have the price of carbon accurately displayed because of externalities. But where's the subsidy to coal or oil compared to solar? I can't see it.
I can get the figures for you if you like. It's on the order of 10 times greater for oil than it is for solar. In fact, for oil alone, I believe it is 10 times greater than all renewable energies in the country today. It's something on that order.
But what form does that subsidy take?
It's in the form of tax breaks for oil companies, in the form of leases on federal land that are given away at minimal cost.
Okay.
I'm not making this up.
Yeah. No, it's my job to be skeptical.
Okay, well, Google it.
I read somewhere that the output of solar power, solar-generated energy on this planet is equivalent to one coal-fired power station.
No, I think that's an exaggeration.
Or that order of magnitude.
We'd want a hell of a coal-fired station if that were the case. But the thing, I think you're asking a lot of questions about the current status of solar. That's not the questions that should be asked. You should be asking about the growth of solar.
Sure.
Because if you ask about the current status, it's obviously low.
Let me be skeptical a bit more then. I've talked to a whole heap of people who say, I don't know, wind power, solar power is the way forward. But things need to happen first. But they're going to happen, you know.
They are happening. This is not a question of will they happen. If you want to understand the future, you need to look at.
We're going to get there.
If you want to understand the future, you need to look at the first and second derivative with respect to time. What is the rate of change, and what is basically what is the velocity and what is the acceleration?
Right.
If you want to know the future, if you want to know the present, you can look at the current picture.
Well, you can't always extrapolate, but I take your point. Go on.
Yeah, I mean because if you're asking about the present. Obviously, solar is a very small part of the present. If you're asking about the future, then we'd say, well, what is the growth rate of solar, and what is the acceleration of that growth rate? And the growth rate is enormous.
From low bases.
Yes, from low bases. But all things start from a low basis.
Sure.
But there's the beauty of compound growth. And you have to say, well, is there a limitation on that compound growth? Is there something... I mean, some of your questions you're getting at, like, for example, is the subsidy that is applied to solar, if that's taken away, does that completely take the wind out of the sails? I mean, that's a good question to ask. And the answer is that it would diminish the growth But because a large part of that price is actually demand-driven, and because that there are substantial technology breakthroughs, particularly in the area of thin-film solar, that are coming out of Silicon Valley, that says that if you look forward just a few years, without assuming any miracles, the cost of solar becomes lower at the point of consumption than normal electricity, and then it is insane growth without any taxpayer subsidies. And then the other point that I made, which is, you have to evaluate both solar and hydrocarbon-based energy sources in the same way with respect to subsidies. So one cannot criticize the subsidies for renewable energy and not criticize the subsidies for coal or oil.
Yeah, and my point as well about the market not reflecting the true cost of coal and oil, particularly
Absolutely
to
true.
the environment.
Absolutely true. There should be a carbon tax.
Sure. I hear you as saying it's going to happen anyway, but let's, to help it on its way, what needs to be done?
Well, in the US, the most important thing today is there's a federal tax credit that is possibly expiring at the end of this year. That's the 30% I was referring to earlier. There's a lot of momentum to get it extended, but that needs to get extended. The fallout of that will slow down the adoption in the US slightly. So I'd say that's the most important thing for the US.
Absolutely. In fact, I was asked this question recently when I was at a panel in New York, and I think what is a very reasonable approach is simply take the subsidies that are applied to oil and coal and shift those to renewable resources.
Okay.
In other words, don't even increase the tax burden on consumers. Just shift the subsidy from the stuff that is not the future to the stuff that is the future.
I shouldn't ask you this, but does it depend, but I will anyway, does it depend on the election?
I think either candidate will be better than a Texas oil man.
It's definitely.
I make no comment. I mean,
that's just a guess. I mean, it could be.
Why do you say that? I mean, do you detect any difference between, say, I don't know, John McCain and, let's say, Barack Obama in attitudes towards this and that change you want, or that absence of change you want, rather?
Based on what I can see, is they're both very supportive of renewable power.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, McCain has been putting out ads on the environment and how he's in favor of green technology and that he's concerned about global warming and that kind of thing. So I think he's serious about that. I think, frankly, the candidates are going to be fighting. They're going to be vying with each other to
shake your hand and.
Well, no, shake my hand. They've been vying with each other to be more green. I think they're going to.
Sure.
The debate is going to be who is more green, not whether it's good to be green or not.
I was going to say, I mean, why this change does. I mean, I lived in New York until 2 years ago, and greenery. If you said to a taxi driver, global warming, he'd look at you like you said you're a paedophile, you know? Perhaps not in New York, but it was verboten, banned, it was madness, and now suddenly here we are. What's changed?
Well, there's more and more evidence supporting climate change.
But that evidence was there pretty clear before, you know.
Things get clearer over time, and it also takes time for a message to permeate through society. And I think there are some other factors there as well, which are not necessarily environmental, but are national security and pocketbook.
Sure.
So, I think
Saudi oil.
Well, yeah, there's huge sums of money going to countries that are not our best friends. But I think really the biggest single thing is that people look at the cost of gasoline and they realize that we've got to figure out another plan, because even if there were no environmental concerns and even if there were no national security concerns, if you're dealing with a non-renewable resource and you have demand increasing dramatically with China and India industrializing, representing 40% of the world's population, you're headed for a bad end if you don't find a renewable mode of transportation and energy production.
Sure. We've got 4 minutes and 40 seconds left. So, I mean, can we have some quick fire questions? Very, very sharp questions. There's a lady there. You're going to have to shout because the microphone will take time to get to you. Solar power, did you get solar power green at the point of consumption?
Green at the point of consumption, but what about manufacturing and recycling of the units? Where are we with that?
What about the units thereafter? Is that green?
Well, I think the question was, solar power is green at the point of consumption, but what about the production of the photovoltaics, and what about recycling of them afterwards? Yes. In the very early days of solar, it actually cost more energy to produce the panel than you would likely extract from it over its lifetime. But that ceased being true about 30 years ago. At this point, in fact, I did a little back-of-the-envelope analysis, which I wrote on a blog piece in the Tesla Motors website. The payback period, the energy payback period for photovoltaics is about 3 to 4 years, at worst case, and really best case is like 2 years. And they've got a lot. We're warranted for 25, and the warranty and their actual likely lifespan is 30, 35.
Yeah.
So don't worry about recycling, because it'll be like your children doing the recycling. I mean, it's like these things have a true lifespan approaching half a century.
So, gentlemen, there we have 3 minutes and 1 second left. Just speak out loudly if there's no mic.
How do you make the installation process more efficient? Do you start putting solar panels in IKEA flat packs, or what? How do you actually improve the labour
That's a great question. So something that we've done is we'd go into a community, and instead of doing one home installation, we'd focus on doing an aggregated installation. That was one of the first innovations that we did. So you can be a lot more efficient by installing 50 or 100 homes in a concentrated area versus driving all over the place. And there are also a whole bunch of other little things, operational efficiencies that occur in running a large-scale operation.
No, I think actually the point
efficiency on technology and installation, mounting equipment, efficiency in truck rolls, efficiency in sales, efficiency in education. There's so many little things that you have to do correct in order to reduce a penny along the line.
And then, as you mentioned, there's the financing vehicles. I mean, the thing that SolarCity has really pioneered is, they did a $300 million deal with Morgan Stanley, which allows SolarCity to offer people solar installation, no money down, and your electricity bill decreases. So it's just, it's a no-brainer proposition, and that's taking off like wildfire, as you'd imagine. But really, it's like Sam Walton said about Walmart. It's not that Walmart does one thing 100% better. They do 100 things 1% better, and it's a complex, difficult problem. And it would be incorrect to sort of highlight one particular thing and say that's the reason. Any more than, say, if you look at Southwest Airlines, people say, oh, the reason they're efficient is because they use 737s. That's one of about 50 things that they do that makes them better.
We got less than a minute left. One seriously quick question out there? No? In which case, oh yeah, go on.
What about the environmental impact of producing solar panels?
What about the environmental impact of producing solar panels? Quickly.
There's no significant environmental impact. There's the energy that's used in, say, refining of the silicon. But as I mentioned earlier, the energy used in the creation of the solar panel there's an energy payback period of really 2 to 4 years, and you've got a panel life which is at least 30, if not closer to 50 years.
We have 11 seconds left, and that is not enough for a question, believe me. Lyndon, Rive, Elon Musk, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
All right.